Armani Code the EDT versus Code Parfum, which one is the best? So I bought Code Parfum back when it was released in 2022 and Code EDT quite some time after that. And having worn them both quite a bit, I thought I would share my thoughts on the two, go through some of the sort of similarities, some of the differences, and which one I think is the best. I will go through what they smell like, then compare them when it comes to performance, usage, mass appeal and more. So let's start with Armani Code Parfum. Code Parfum opens up with a dose of citrusy freshness with that bergamot. Now, back when I bought it, that initial dose of freshness felt like quite a sort of a short-lived one, but nowadays it does feel like it stays for at least a little bit longer. So not sure if it needed a bit of sort of a maceration or what, but it lasts at least a little bit longer than back when I bought it, even though it's definitely still not a long-lasting one. A few minutes further into the opening, that initial dose of freshness starts to sort of soften up, giving room for the clary sage, and it's more sort of a herbal kind of freshness. So the opening in a nutshell is basically all about a refreshing mix of citrusy and aromatic freshness. It doesn't take that long for it to change again, and to me it's really that iris that turns it all into this mix of powderiness and freshness. At this point, Code Parfum is sort of a softly powdery in a fresh and clean way with a slight hint of sort of a creaminess to it. If you love sort of a fresh and powdery sense, then this is most likely the part where you start enjoying Code Parfum a bit more. The more it dries down, the less fresh it gets, and instead more woody and vanillic. The dry down is mostly about that cedar wood, giving it a prominent but light kind of woodiness, together with a bit of sort of a vanillic sweetness, and the whole thing still being powdery. Now, with a bit of sweetness, I mean just a little bit. This is not a prominent dose of sweetness at all. So in a nutshell, Code Parfum opens up in a fresh way, then turns into a powdery blend and dries down to a mix of woodiness and powderiness with vanilla. Comparing it to the OG EDP, I definitely get that sort of a Code DNA, but with a few tweaks and made lighter and more sort of an air with the iris. And I know I said it before, but Code Parfum could almost be like a blend of the OG Code EDP and something from the Gentleman line of fragrances, or almost like Armani's sort of a version of Prada L'Homme. So there are a ton of powdery fragrances out there, and also quite a few sort of a fresh and powdery scents. But what I feel takes Armani Code Parfum in a sort of a unique direction is overall how incredibly well blended it is, but also the sort of airy feel it has. It is powdery, but its powderiness has a sort of an airy quality to it, which I think is fantastic. And while the dry down does have a bit more sort of a weight and depth to it, thanks to the vanilla and the cedar, it still never goes into being a heavy kind of powdery scent. So moving on to Armani Code the EDT. This to me opens up in a citrusy fresh way. They tweaked it a bit though, and while it's also citrusy fresh like the Parfum, it's also not the same. And in less than a minute, in comes the lavender, and it's basically this sort of a citrusy and aromatic fresh opening that has a fantastic hint of sweetness to it. Now, citrus and lavender is really not something unique, but the soft sweetness it has gives it a bit of nuance for sure. I'm a big fan of lavender, so I definitely enjoy this. And if you're sort of the same, then you most likely enjoy the opening. But again, it's definitely not something unique or anything. The more it heads into the mist, the less intense the lavender gets, and the whole thing changes into a mix of vanilla and woodiness. The lavender is still there, giving the whole thing a bit of sort of aromatic brightness and shine. But the more it dries down, the more it's pretty much all about the mix of vanilla and cedar. The dry down is mostly vanillic and woody, with a bit of sweetness and amarness to it. And if you ever smell the OG Code EDP, then you most likely recognize that woody and vanillic Code DNA. The woody and vanillic dry down does have a bit of sort of a warmth and depth to it, but I do not feel this is a very warm or deep kind of scent. So a recap, a fresh and aromatic opening with a focus on lavender, and a woody and vanillic dry down that's a bit sweet and warm. The more I've used it, the more I've come to enjoy the full dry down of it. The sweetness it has in the dry down together with the vanilla and its woodiness is quite sexy. I feel it's sort of based on the OG Code EDP, but an evolution from Code Parfum, and almost like a fusion of the two. We are going by scent first in this comparison, but let's quickly compare the performance. Code EDT's projection is a bit above average, but not strong. Now, I know some get great performance out of Code EDT, but this on me is not strong. Code Parfum on me is somewhere between average and strong, and the performance has been improved the more I put a dent to it, and it stays quite a bit on my skin. People will notice it if you are sort of within normal conversation range, but it's definitely not beast mode. And overall, at least on my skin, Parfum has a bit better performance. So let's talk about usage. Both are scents that can be used throughout the year, but at least to me, Code Parfum is slightly more versatile with its more sort of a fresh and powdery scent. We are basically talking about fresh openings with woody and vanillic focused dry downs, and none of them being overly warm. So when it comes to like seasons, they definitely work throughout the year. As for occasions, any really, I can't think of any sort of occasion these two could not work. They are not intensely fresh though, so maybe wear something else to the gym. So let's talk about compliments and mass appeal. Both are compliment getters, and I received quite a few compliments with Code Parfum, but I also use it a lot more. These two are mass appealing scents, and that Code DNA is a mass appealing one. So let's quickly compare the two scent-wise, and I'll share which of them I think is my favorite. They both focus on woodiness and vanilla at the base with that sort of a Code DNA, and both open up with a bit of freshness. So there's absolutely no doubt there's a bit of sort of a similarity here. But the freshness is definitely different, and the lavender in the EDT gives the EDT a different feel compared to Parfum's Claire Sage. And where the EDT goes into a dry down that's primarily woody, vanillic, and a bit sweet, Code Parfum is, at least to me, powdery, woody, and vanillic. Code Parfum is overall more sort of a balance, whereas the dry down of the EDT is more vanilla centric. Again, none of them are heavy or deep, but the EDT definitely has a bit more sort of a depth and warmth to it, thanks to the more prominent vanilla and sweetness. Whereas Code Parfum has a sort of an airy feel through it all. EDT is essentially focused on vanilla with cedar and sweetness, whereas Code Parfum is a more balanced woody and vanillic scent that's powdery in a sort of a fresh and light way. So which of them is the best? Going into this comparison, I pretty much already had my favorite. However, the sweetness of the EDT completely charmed me. Not sure if it needed a bit of maceration or if it's related to the slightly sort of a faulty bottle leaking air, but it did not smell that good before. It's actually a bit addictive, and I'm so glad I did this in-depth comparison because I have a sort of a newfound appreciation for it, and I definitely enjoy Code EDT more now than ever before. But even with its sexy sweet dry down, I'm still leaning more towards Code Parfum. I absolutely love its sort of a airy, fresh powderness and how the whole thing is almost balanced to perfection. So Code Parfum is to me the winner in this battle. Now, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on these two and which of them you think is the best and why. Like this video, thank you. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you hit that subscribe. Make sure you check out the videos over there, and I'll see you in the next one.